10-year-old Ethan believed that no matter how difficult life became, his parents would always be there for him. They weren't a wealthy family. They lived in a small house on the edge of town, where the paint peeled from the walls and the roof leaked whenever it rained. But to Ethan, none of that mattered. Every morning, he woke up believing he was loved. At least he used to. Everything changed on a cold autumn afternoon. Ethan returned home from school with a smile on his face and a drawing clutched in his hands. His teacher had praised him in front of the class, and he couldn't wait to show his parents. But the moment he stepped through the front door, he felt something was wrong. The house was silent. His mother sat at the kitchen table, her eyes red and swollen. His father stood near the window with his arms crossed tightly over his chest. Neither of them smiled, neither of them spoke. "Dad, Mom," Ethan asked nervously, "is everything okay?" His father turned around slowly. The look in his eyes sent a chill down Ethan's spine. "Tell us the truth," his father demanded. Ethan blinked. "What truth?" His mother suddenly stood up. "Stop pretending," she shouted. The drawing slipped from Ethan's fingers and landed on the floor. He had never seen his mother so angry. "I don't understand," he whispered. His father walked toward him. "We know what you've done, but I didn't do anything. The next few minutes felt like a nightmare." His parents accused him of things he couldn't understand. They claimed he had caused problems that had torn the family apart. No matter how much Ethan cried and denied it, they refused to listen. Then it happened. His father slapped him across the face. The force knocked him backward. Before he could recover, his mother slapped him too. The pain wasn't nearly as bad as the shock. Ethan stared at them through tears, unable to believe what had happened. These were the people who had kissed his forehead at bedtime. The people who had promised to protect him. Now they looked at him as if he were a stranger. Within an hour, they threw some clothes into an old backpack and ordered him into the car. No one explained where they were going. The entire ride passed in silence. Ethan sat in the back seat crying quietly, hoping someone would tell him this was all a misunderstanding. Nobody did. Eventually, the car stopped at a rundown bus station on the outskirts of the city. The place looked forgotten by the world. His father opened the door and placed the backpack beside him. "Get out," he said coldly. Ethan froze. "Dad, please, get out." His mother refused to look at him. Trembling, Ethan stepped onto the cracked pavement. He expected them to stop him. He expected them to hug him and tell him everything would be okay. Instead, his father climbed back into the driver's seat. The engine started. For a brief second, Ethan thought they might change their minds, but the car pulled away. And kept going. "Dad," Ethan screamed, running after it. "Mom." The car disappeared around the corner. Gone, just like that. As darkness settled over the bus station, Ethan sat alone on a cold metal bench, clutching his backpack. Every passing minute felt heavier than the last. He kept watching the road, convinced his parents would come back. They had to. Parents didn't leave their children behind, but midnight came, then dawn, and as the first rays of sunlight touched the empty station, a heartbreaking truth settled into Ethan's chest. His parents were not coming back. The world he knew had ended, and he was completely alone. The morning after his parents abandoned him, Ethan woke up shivering on the cold metal bench of the bus station. His eyes were swollen from crying, and his stomach ached with hunger. For a few moments, he forgot where he was. Then the memories came rushing back. The slaps, the accusations, the car driving away, the empty road. His parents were gone. A bus station employee eventually noticed the frightened boy sitting alone. After asking several questions and receiving only tearful answers, the woman contacted the authorities. Within hours, Ethan found himself in a crowded children's shelter. Everyone there had a story. Some had lost their parents. Others had been removed from dangerous homes. But Ethan felt different. His parents were alive. They had simply chosen not to want him. That thought hurt more than anything else. The following years were some of the hardest of Ethan's life. He moved from one foster home to another. Some families were kind but temporary. Others treated him like an unwanted burden. At school, he struggled to fit in. While other children talked about family vacations and birthday celebrations, Ethan stayed quiet. He hated answering questions about his parents. Whenever someone asked where they were, a knot formed in his throat. The truth was too painful to say aloud. As he grew older, the anger inside him grew as well. Every night, he replayed that terrible day in his mind. He wondered what he had done wrong. Why hadn't they listened? Why had they abandoned him so easily? There were moments when the loneliness felt unbearable. Moments when he believed he would never escape the shadow of that bus station. But life had one surprise left for him. When Ethan was 15, he was placed with an elderly foster couple named Walter and Margaret. Unlike the others, they didn't treat him like a temporary guest. They treated him like family. Walter taught him practical skills, from repairing broken furniture to managing money. Margaret helped him with his schoolwork and encouraged him whenever self-doubt crept in. Most importantly, neither of them asked him to hide his pain. One evening, after a particularly difficult day, Ethan finally broke down. "I wasn't worth staying for," he whispered through tears. Margaret immediately wrapped her arms around him. "No, Ethan," she said firmly. "The people who left made a terrible choice. Their choice does not determine your worth." Those words changed something inside him. For the first time in years, he began to believe that maybe his future didn't have to be defined by his past. From that day forward, Ethan threw himself into his education. He studied late into the night. He earned scholarships. He worked part-time jobs after school and saved every dollar he could. While others spent their free time chasing distractions, Ethan focused on building a life nobody could take away from him. The pain never completely disappeared. The memory of the bus station still haunted him, but instead of letting it destroy him, he used it as fuel. Year after year, he pushed himself harder, and eventually, the abandoned boy who once slept alone on a metal bench became a determined young man with big dreams. He had survived what many people couldn't, and deep inside he made a promise to himself. One day he would uncover the truth about why his parents had abandoned him. No matter how long it took, no matter where that truth was hiding, and when that day came, everything would change. 22 years had passed since the night Ethan was abandoned at the bus station. The frightened little boy who had cried himself to sleep on a cold metal bench no longer existed. Now, at 32 years old, Ethan was the owner of a successful construction company. He lived in a beautiful home, drove luxury cars, and employed hundreds of people. To the outside world, he was the definition of success. But money couldn't erase old wounds. There wasn't a single year that passed without him thinking about his parents. He still remembered their faces, his father's cold stare, his mother's refusal to look at him, the sound of their car disappearing into the darkness. No matter how successful he became, one question continued to haunt him. Why? Why had they abandoned their own child? The answer arrived when he least expected it. One rainy afternoon, Ethan received a phone call from an unfamiliar number. The caller was an elderly lawyer named Richard Hayes. The man sounded nervous, Mr. Carter. He said, "I have something that belongs to you, something that should have been given to you many years ago." Curious and confused, Ethan agreed to meet him. The following day, he visited the lawyer's small office. Richard looked exhausted, as though he had been carrying a heavy burden for decades. Without saying much, the old man handed Ethan a worn cardboard box. "Your grandmother asked me to keep this safe," Richard explained. "She wanted you to receive it when the time was right. Ethan's heart raced. His grandmother had died years ago. Why had she left him a box? With trembling hands, he opened it. Inside were old photographs, letters, legal documents, and a small leather journal. As he began reading, his entire world shifted. The journal belonged to his grandmother. Page after page revealed a horrifying truth. 22 years earlier, Ethan's wealthy uncle, Victor, had desperately wanted control of the family's inheritance. He viewed Ethan as an obstacle. Victor had secretly fabricated evidence that made it appear Ethan was not his parents' biological son. Fake DNA reports, forged documents, manufactured stories. He spent months poisoning Ethan's parents against him. According to the journal, Victor convinced them that Ethan's existence was responsible for financial ruin, family conflict, and years of lies. Blinded by anger and manipulation, Ethan's parents believed him. The abandonment at the bus station wasn't the result of hatred. It was the result of deception. Ethan sat frozen as he read the final pages. Then came the part that shattered his heart. Several months after abandoning him, his parents discovered Victor's lies. The DNA evidence had been fake. Every accusation had been false. Ethan had always been their son. Always. The journal revealed that his parents spent years desperately searching for him. They hired investigators. They visited shelters. They followed countless leads. But by then, Ethan had already been moved through multiple foster systems. The trail went cold, and with every passing year, their regret grew heavier. Tears filled Ethan's eyes. For 22 years, he had believed his parents simply stopped loving him. Now he knew the truth. They had made a terrible mistake, a devastating mistake, but they had suffered for it every single day. As Ethan closed the journal, another emotion replaced his shock: determination. The truth had been hidden for more than 2 decades. But not anymore. For the first time in 22 years, he knew exactly where his parents were living. And after all these years, he was finally ready to see them again, not as the abandoned boy they left behind, but as the man who had survived. 3 days after discovering the truth, Ethan found himself standing beside his black luxury SUV, staring at a small piece of paper. Written on it was an address, his parents' address. For 22 years, he had imagined this moment countless times. Sometimes he pictured himself yelling at them. Sometimes he imagined turning around and never seeing them again. And sometimes, on the loneliest nights, he imagined hearing the words he had waited his entire life to hear: "We're sorry." Now the moment had finally arrived. As Ethan drove toward the quiet neighborhood where his parents lived, memories flooded his mind: the bus station, the foster homes, the sleepless nights, the birthdays spent alone, the years of wondering why he wasn't enough. His hands tightened around the steering wheel. Part of him still carried that pain, but another part understood something important. The real villain had never been his parents. It had been the lies that poisoned their hearts. When he finally arrived, he was surprised by what he saw. The house was small and worn, nothing like the comfortable home he remembered from childhood. The garden was overgrown. The paint was faded. Time had clearly not been kind to its owners. Ethan stepped out of the SUV and walked toward the front door. His heart pounded with every step. Then he knocked. A few moments later, the door slowly opened. An elderly woman stood before him. Her hair had turned completely gray. Her face carried deep lines of age and sorrow. For several seconds, she simply stared at him. Then her eyes widened. The color drained from her face. "Ethan," she whispered. His throat tightened. "Hello, Mom." The woman immediately burst into tears. A cry escaped her lips as she covered her mouth with trembling hands. Behind her, an older man appeared. The moment he saw Ethan, he froze. His father's eyes filled with tears. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them moved. It was as if 2 years of guilt had suddenly crashed into them all at once. Finally, Ethan's father stepped forward. "I don't deserve forgiveness," he said, his voice breaking. "What we did to you was unforgivable." His mother sobbed uncontrollably. "We searched for you," she cried. "For years we never stopped looking." Ethan nodded slowly. "I know." The words shocked them. "You know?" his father asked. Ethan reached into his bag and removed the journal, letters, and documents. Then he told them everything. Victor's deception, the fake evidence, the lies that destroyed their family. As the truth unfolded, both parents broke down completely. For years, they had blamed themselves. For years, they had lived with unbearable regret. Now, at last, every hidden piece of the puzzle was finally revealed. A few weeks later, Ethan arranged a family gathering. In front of relatives, lawyers, and witnesses, Victor's crimes were exposed. The forged documents were presented. The fraud was proven. His reputation collapsed overnight. The inheritance he had stolen was returned. His decades of deception came crashing down. That was Ethan's revenge, not cruelty, not hatred, truth. The same truth that had been buried for 22 years. As for his parents, Ethan made a choice that surprised even himself. He forgave them, not because their actions didn't hurt, not because the past could be erased, but because carrying anger any longer would only continue the damage Victor had started. Over time, the family slowly rebuilt what had been broken. It wasn't perfect. Some scars never fully disappear. But love began to grow where pain once lived. And on the anniversary of the day he had been abandoned, Ethan drove his parents to the old bus station. They stood together in silence. Then his mother took his hand. His father placed a hand on his shoulder. For the first time in 22 years, Ethan didn't feel abandoned. He felt home. The boy who had once been left behind had finally driven the truth home, and in doing so, found the family he thought he had lost forever.